Welcome back to Behind the Bench. Today I am joined by Mr. Lee Rudin, founder and CEO of Rudin Law. Such a pleasure to have you here, Lee. I've watched your journey all the way through LinkedIn for many, many years since you started the firm, and to be able to share here with everyone listening your backstory, how you got here, the ups and downs. I'm really excited about this one, so thank you for jumping in here.
Appreciate you having me, Dan. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So why don't we kick things off? Why don't you, for those of you that don't know, that haven't shared, seen your story, seen your brand, the personality behind the Rudin Law, business. Why don't you share a little bit more about who you are? Tell us a little bit about your firm and sort of break it down for us in that capacity, the high level story.
Yeah, high level, we're an injury law firm based, right now this office that I'm sitting in is right outside of New Orleans, but we're building kind of our flagship in uptown New Orleans. I was a transplant, or I am a transplant here in New Orleans. I'm from New Jersey originally, came down to New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina right before Hurricane Katrina to go to college, evacuated with the rest of the city for 6 months, back up to the Northeast. Came back in January of '06 and have never left. I joke that the gumbo must have gotten in my blood and didn't kill me, so I'm still here. I love New Orleans. I love the state of Louisiana. I feel like it's a great place to have a practice because people here, they work to live and not the other way around, which is a lot of what it's like up in the Northeast. So, running a PI practice is very people centric. And where we are in this country, in this area, is also very people-centric. A lot of what we do is community-oriented. And so if you like people, which I do, I love, I can make friends with a brick wall, then it's a great business because what you're doing, at its core is trying to help people. So
yeah, that's great. A full transplant into the New Orleans scene. I love it. And I'm sure everyone out there knows you or soon enough will know you. So let's peel it back a little bit and start with the origin story. Not the laptop in your den or anything like that, but more like what that moment in time was that you decided to build your own practice. Based off my understanding, you came from the other side and, wanted to come over and support the people like you just mentioned. But can we peel it back one layer deeper and really understand that moment in time that helped you get here and the why behind, the Rudin Law firm?
Yeah, well, I've been on a bunch of these pods, and so I've probably told this story in some variety, but the story really started with the woman who currently cleans this office and my house and has been cleaning my wife and I's different apartments and houses for probably 12, 13 years now. And one day, many years in, she says, "Hey, I'm getting screwed by my landlord. He's claiming we caused all this damage after we left the property, and it wasn't true. And I know this woman, I know her family. There's no way that they would have left this place in such a state of disrepair. I just thought this landlord was shaking her down, and I didn't like it. And so I told her, give me your lease, answer a couple questions for me, and I got it. And so, fast forward, I looked at where the landlord had made mistakes under the law and under the lease. I called a meeting with his lawyer. I walked into the meeting and I said, look, this is what you're going to do. You're going to leave this lady alone, or I'm going to walk out of here, call my assistant at this defense firm I was at, and we're going to file a lawsuit against your client for all these things. And he's like, well, I don't have the authority to do that. And I said, well, I don't care. You could call your client and tell him you got him sued because you didn't have the authority to do it. So I literally left the office, called my assistant. She filed the lawsuit. We sent the lawsuit over to that lawyer. The next morning, I got a phone call from the landlord himself saying, hey, what can we do to stop all of this? And I said, all you got to do is leave this lady alone. I'll drop the lawsuit. We'll chalk it up to experience. I didn't ask him for any money. I told her $500, you got to eat that. But I'm not going to do that. That's not the point. You're clear. And she said, how can I repay you? And I said, look, tell your friends if they get into little fender benders or whatever to call me. Because I had seen from the defense side what it looked like. We were always the ones billing our hours and making our widgets, and then we're writing these checks. And the lawyer on the other side either wasn't doing anything or wasn't any good at what he was doing. And I said, I could be that idiot working the other side, helping people. And, the other part of it is I had an insurance client of mine, local insurance client who was great to work for. And I joked to them, you guys are too generous. Like, I can't keep working for you. I need to start suing you. And, if you do a good job for an insurance company, what do you get? It's like winning the pie eating contest, and what you get is more pie. But when you help someone, an individual, you can see the impact. You can feel the impact when you give them that check, even the small ones. Because for some people, a small check makes a big difference. And so I love that part of this, is that, you can really, when people, some of these person-to-person reviews you get, not the ones they write, but when they talk to you or they text you, like, it's amazing sometimes. So I love that.
Yeah, that's incredible. In the early stages of building the business, like, what were some of the things that were far harder than you expected? Right off the gate, you're like, repay me by telling your friends to call me and, getting those early referrals. But I can't imagine that the early days of building your business, the referrals came every single day in order to sustain the business. What were some of those challenges early on that, really were unforeseen when you quit the defense side and, moved to the plaintiff side?
So when everything I just told you about starting it, that all happened while I was at two different firms. It slowly began to grow at one firm, then I moved to another firm, took that work with me, and it, organically over time, you help people. They tell their friends, they tell their neighbors, they tell their family members, and that snowball begins to get bigger and bigger until you hope that it's an avalanche. But so I was able to do that, while also having a defense job that was paying me a salary. So that was a nice transition. But when I came over, I had to really, yes, I just kind of ready, fire, aimed when I decided to leave. But I did also understand what cases I had, who was coming with me, and what I would need to do to get more while those other ones were resolving, right? Because you don't want to have an empty docket. But I knew I was coming over with something, not nothing. And so then, what I found was, as soon as you tell people what you're doing, people that you already know, that like you, that trust you, that know you're a good lawyer, now you're saying, hey, I'm actually working as a plaintiff injury attorney. I'm not doing the other stuff. And they're like, oh, I got into a wreck. Let me call you. Or so-and-so got into a wreck. So you got to be out there telling them what you're doing, which is why, as you alluded to when we first started, like, why I'm doing the LinkedIn stuff, why I've got the most ridiculous social media account that I can conjure up, because they got to know you. They got to see you. Otherwise, how can they hire you?
Yeah. No, that's completely fair. And you have to remember that not everyone listening to this podcast knows the ridiculous things that you did. So let's actually go a little bit deeper there. So, early days of your law practice, I've seen all these stories and, your stories about the way that your dad was sharing, what are you doing on social media and all this good stuff. And, the dress up and the ludicrousness around the things that you've built on social media have driven such a buzz, and it creates that personality of Lee Rudin. Is that the personality of Lee Rudin, or is that a guerrilla marketing, testing out new ideas perspective? Like, where did that come from?
It's funny, as I've kind of tried to figure out my own villain origin story, right? Like, where does it come from? Well, I always, as a kid, I did, like, when I went to summer camp, I would do, like, the plays that they had. I like artsy things in that way. Like, I love music. Live music is one of my favorite things in the whole world. Going to concerts, it's probably why I love being in New Orleans, because music is so at your fingertips all the time. But I grew up loving, if you look over my shoulder, I got a pro wrestling belt and Bret the Hitman Hart on the wall, and I loved pro wrestling. And I joked to somebody, I was like, it's probably the times when I'm like in the shower as a kid, pretending I'm a wrestler and like doing the promo in the mirror that got me comfortable talking on camera and being a little bit of a showman. And then I've always had somewhat of a brash personality. Like, I've never been afraid to say what I thought, and not concerned with the consequences. Don't really care what people think of me, because they've thought about it already. They've been mean and cruel and whatever. I mean, I am who I am, and I'm okay with it. And I think that a lot of people, they care too much about what people think, and so they don't say the things that they really believe. And I wore the other day on social media, I made a hat that said "Make America Rude Again." And I came up with the idea. My wife was like, you absolutely cannot make that hat. Like, you cannot. And I made it because I was going to sit with another lawyer. I told him about it. He's like, oh, that's awesome. I want one of those. So I went on Etsy and I made 2 of them. He's got one, I have one. And then I put up that picture, and you would be shocked of how many people were like, oh, dude, where can I get that hat? Can you make that hat for me? So now I'm going to run 50 of them, and I'm going to give them out to people with the idea is like, if you want to wear my gear, if you think that that's something that you like, free advertising for me. But again, like maybe this country needs a little bit more rudeness. Like maybe saying what we think. If things aren't going the right way, you got to speak up, right? You can't just bury your head and just let things be the way they are. And so, in my business, where does that go? Telling an insurance company, hey, like your bullshit offer is bullshit. Like we're going to file the lawsuit and let somebody else make the call. Mm-hmm. We're not just going to take what you say and accept it because we don't agree. Great. That's being rude.
Right. There you go. Okay. So outside of like, the brand of, stop being polite, get rude, your slogan, your hashtag, the way that you present yourself digitally and in person, when was that conceptualized? Was that from the start where you're like, I want to be different, I need to stand out, and I need to drive growth in other ways? And how uncomfortable was that at the very early days?
So at first, when my firm came out, I started the firm June 1 of 2023, and we were a hybrid because I had some defense work, I had this other insurance client, and I couldn't do this, branding, because the branding is basically fuck the insurance company, and you can't say fuck the insurance company while you're representing the insurance company. So the brand was put the work in, because I thought that I could play with like Rudin, put the work in. It was a line out of a song of a band that I really liked, and so I just thought it made sense as an innocuous brand. And then as I realized that I really wanted to lean into the plaintiff personal injury work exclusively, I was winding down my insurance defense work. I said, I think this get rude stuff would work. And I started talking to people like we're doing, a Zoom chat, a Google Meet chat. And I'd look at them and say, Dan, are you tired of getting pushed around by insurance companies? And they'd smirk like you're smirking. And I'd say, you got to stop being polite and get rude. And they'd chuckle, or I'd get a wry smile. And I'm like, I think anecdotally this is going to work because it's clever and it's unique. It works with my name, and it's really hard to forget. Like, get rude is 7 letters. It's 2 words. They're all simple. And then I decided when I was going to do it, I said, okay, now I got to get all the things. So I got the domain name. I grabbed the social handles when I could, in whatever capacity I could. And then somebody came to me with the opportunity to buy an 800 number, which is a very hard thing to get because rude is also sued. So I got one for now talking to people, like the price I paid for it was a song, because people advertise, hey, you want to buy this all digit number for $100,000? I was like, fuck, I don't want that. So anyway, that once I talked to people and I realized that in this space with the style of the practice, like I think it's going to work. And the feedback's been tremendous, since we launched it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you're really great at staying true to your brand. Everything is on brand always, no matter what. I mean, hopefully you wash that t-shirt or at least have 365 of them, because I feel like I see you wearing that every time I see you.
I have this shirt in every single color. I made this version with the gold print that says stop being polite on the front. I literally had, when they were printing it in the gold, I said, cool, go grab me all 7 of those dry fit shirts and run me one in that color. So like no one has this purple one, but I do.
There you go. It's one-off. It's a one-off print. That's awesome. So, we talk about the way you've positioned, the way you've branded your firm, where you've got to today. Like, what is the current status quo of Rudin Law? Like, where have you come? It's 2026. We're a couple years later now.
Yeah, we my team, I think we're up to 14 people, which is it's not a vanity play. Like I don't care about the numbers for the sake of the numbers, but the way that we've built the team, part offshore, part local, onshore, is designed to be able to do the things in an excellent way. And part of that, a large part of that, is client communication And I think it's hard, although there are automations that you can build in, if they want to talk to somebody, you got to have the somebodies for them to talk to. And so, like my sales team, my intake team, I have one local, I have one offshore. I've got a local paralegal. I've got a local attorney. I've got a offshore attorney who's, because he's in Pakistan, but he serves as a paralegal for us. But he's awesome and he's brilliant. And so, and then I've got client advocates who are kind of my case managers that work with my local paralegal. They're offshore. They're also excellent. So I've built this team part by necessity, because offshore team members can be lower cost, but also you can find great talent, and just because they're not around the corner, as long as you don't need them to run to the post office or to pick up milk for the office, then who cares? You get great talent, and most of the stuff we do is digital anyway.
Okay, so can we talk about that a little bit more? Because I talk to a lot of folks that are contemplating using external folks offshore for different things like paralegal work, intake work, et cetera, et cetera. And there's always this debate, right? It's like, are you getting the right people for the right job? How do you train that? What does that look like? Is it that simple, or is it about hiring the right people, or is it about training mechanisms? What have you seen to be so successful in the way that you've brought on an onshore, offshore team that helps scale out the way that you're running your practice?
Well, you asked me before we came online, you're like, how's it going? And I'm like, it's going fine. And it's true. There's a lot of ups and downs in this business, and the staffing is one of them. Right? We could talk about cash flow and what it takes to operate a firm as you grow it, because that's a pain point too. But I look at the offshore team members, like I look at AI, like I looked at the last secretary I had in my last firm before I started this firm. They're only as good as the training you give them. They're only as good as the instructions you give, right? AI doesn't work if you don't prompt it right. You get trash back because your input was trash. That's the same with a legal secretary who's been doing it for 30 years. I had one, she wasn't any good. And we were paying her oodles of money. And then I figured out, I have these great offshore team members that are making a third of what this woman was making, and they're excellent. But how do they get to be excellent? You gotta train them. And the hardest part is that they're not sitting around the corner where you can just lean over their shoulder and show them something. But then you have to be engaged with them, get on these Zoom calls, chat back and forth with them, go over revisions to documents so that they understand the why, and then the problems don't get repeated. But you can make a really great impact on people. So if you care about your clients, you should also care about your team. And if it matters to you to have people that are invested, well, that same bonus that you would give your domestic team member, if you give it to an offshore team member, that could change their year. Right? I'm not talking about big money. I'm talking about $1,000, $2,000. Right? If that's what you would give your secretary or your paralegal or whatever, and you give it to someone offshore who's making substantially less, it changes everything for them. The feedback when I've done that in the past is really excellent, and they deserve it, so they should get it.
No, it's good advice. I mean, it's definitely, you got to invest in your people, right? And it doesn't matter if your people are in your office or, many hours away on a different time zone. But there is that, that challenge and offset that you have to do, right? So, no, it's super helpful to hear that. Because I'm not sure that everyone thinks about it that way, right? It's not like you just turn a switch and they understand everything to do with your law practice, right? It's not like it's cheaper talent and that's it, and now they're your staff. You got to treat them as if they were staff sitting beside you.
Yeah, and also remember, a lot of them are being advertised to you as being trained, which they're not. Right? These vendors are not training them the way they should be. Let's put that out there. The other part of it is, maybe they were in customer service, or so they were working for an Amex or a Visa, and they were answering calls. That doesn't mean that they're qualified in the right way to be doing the same thing for your law firm as an intake team member, because they don't know PI yet. So yeah, they can collect data. That's fine. But a large part of being an excellent sales team member is empathy.
Yeah.
And being able to talk somebody through what is a very stressful part of their life when they call you to convince them that you're the right firm for them. Well, that person has to have some knowledge about how the process is going to work so that they can be empathetic and be a guide through the process so that the potential new client wants to sign with you. And then you can actually show them what you can do. So understand that. But also, if you take it for what it costs, right? If you like get what you pay for, look at it that way too. So, okay, is this quality worth what I'm paying?
Yeah. No, for sure. It sounds like obviously you've got your hands tied across the whole business unit, right? You're a lawyer, you're the executive, you're the CEO, you're managing the team members. At what point in time, I mean, you're still relatively fresh, right? But at one point in time, did you start to think about your transition from just being the lawyer to operating the business unit of Rudin Law? Like how did you dissect the two of them? Because I'm pretty sure you're still practicing as well, right?
Yeah, I'm still practicing. I mean, I have to be practicing, right? Some of these cases, they've been my cases. Like I'm the one that's going to have to navigate them all the way through, although I have now help to do it. And I don't know that I ever want to get out of it fully, but there are so many elements of the business, especially when it's yours and you're the front person, right? Like you are the brand, that nobody can replace you. You can't have somebody, we're filming some YouTube content tomorrow. Like I can't just plop someone in my seat. Yeah. I've got to be the one doing it if the idea is to continue to build recognition of me, my name, the firm name, because it's tied to me. As we grow, that may become a pain point, and we might decide, hey, we want to introduce other characters into the show. But and then in terms of the operations side, that is where, I've got a fractional COO who's been, a game changer for us. We've got an intake group, like a vendor that we've hired to help coach and monitor our intake team, and they've been fantastic. So we're just choosing where to invest our money in additional, let's say, C-suite, even fractional C-suite folks. And we've decided that operations and intake were really, really important because we think our marketing channels are working as they should at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. So, we're coming up to the end of the show here. There's a few things that I need to understand a little bit deeper. I want the exclusive right to like the biggest mistake that you've made that you regret, or that you think of as like, hey, this helped me, overcome some challenges that I had with inside of my firm, because you do a lot of these, right? And like you mentioned before, you've talked about different stories potentially in different ways. Let's like peel it back a little bit deeper, peel back the layers. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to grow a firm and get to the scale that you are and show up online and be presented as if you're the macho firm that you are. I want to know like what that biggest challenge was for you. If there was a time that, it's only been a couple of years, but you felt like throwing in the towel and how you overcame that. Tell us some cold hard truths that you haven't done publicly.
So I'm going through it now. So this is like fresh off the printer.
Okay.
As you grow, right? This is what I think people miss. Now, I've told this first part of it before, which is like, give yourself 90 to 120 days for the settlements to come in. Like when you're first starting out, figure like even a crappy PI case to get to the point where you send a demand for limits on a low limits case, get it turned around, get the money back in the door. It's going to be 90 to 120, maybe even 150 days to see $1. So that people should understand that when you're first starting out, and the life cycle of the cases. We are a $15,000 minimum case, so it doesn't take a lot of medical bills and a lot of treatment to get to 15 here. But as you grow, right, we had monster months for us in October, November, December. Right, signed like 40 cases, signed 35, signed just under 30. They didn't all stick, but a lot of them stuck. That's way above where our average was for the year before. Well, every single case, if it requires $500 cash out the door, I'm talking to like get medical records or pay for a doctor's visit or send them in Ubers back and forth to certain treatment or whatever it is. If you have hundreds of cases and you're only spending $500 or $1,000 on each case, it becomes death by 1,000 cuts. The amount of cash out the door can be, make your heart flutter a bit. And so when all these other managing partners I've had in the past, and then just other business owners talking about cash flow, it's not exactly as you think it, but the payroll doesn't stop. The marketing spend doesn't stop. Your rent doesn't stop. And these little expenses don't stop. Like, you can't not get the medical records, because then how do you send the demand to move the case forward? You got to spend it. So finding, that's why I think there's all these businesses out there saying, hey, like, we can help you with these case cost loans. It's because as you grow, the little case costs that you're not watching, you're watching the big ones. You see those checks. It's the little ones that add up and add up and add up. And that's a pain point we're experiencing now. And so we're just trying to, move the deck chairs around on the Titanic to get us through the wave until the settlements come in, and then we're back in the flow.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Right off the printer, like you said. I like to end this show traditionally by having you share, one or two pieces of advice to, the listeners here, how you think about whether they're starting something new, starting a practice, joining a practice. It could be that broad. It doesn't have to be in relation to your specific firm specifically, but, coming from the background that you have and to where you've been today and those challenges that you have overcome in order to get yourself to the next level, what are a couple pieces of advice that, you'd want to be shared with you at this stage in the game?
Yeah. Look, this is hard. The part of this could be hard if you have to go and pay for it, but I don't think you do. Ask for help, right? There are coaching groups. There are mastermind type groups where, you have a bunch of your peers or people that are ahead of you in the game that'll meet once a month on these chats. Some of them are free. Some of them you pay to join and get positioned in groups. Ask for help. People were super kind with me locally when I came out with offers of, hey, you could partner with me on a case, or here's some office space if you need it, or here's just some advice that I have. Don't be afraid to ask. People are kinder and more generous than you think. And the advice is invaluable. It doesn't mean you have to take it. It doesn't mean you have to do what they say or what they did. But absorbing it all, listen to the podcast, read the books, because they've forged the path before. They've made the mistakes. I'm making them. I've made them. Maybe if I read a book differently or saw something differently, maybe I don't make that mistake. And then hopefully you don't make some mistakes that I made or that other people have made, and then you're a little bit better off. Might not be perfect, but a little bit better. So don't be afraid to ask, because there's a whole bunch of landmines in this business and in any business. And if you can avoid one or two, then you'd be better off.
Love it. Lee, really appreciate it. Always a pleasure catching up and hanging out with you. How can people find you if they want to talk?
Sure. Super easy. Try to idiot-proof it. Website, getrude.com. The 800 number, 833-GET-RUDE. That's 833-438-7833. On social, we are Get Rude Law on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We've got all sorts of content on those platforms if you want to check something out. And you can always email us, info@getrude.com, claims@getrude.com. And I'm Lee, Lee, at getrude.com.
Love it, man. Really appreciate it. Great to see you. Be well.
Always. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.